podcast number 131. My name is John, and joining me today is Ryan.
Good morning.
Ryan, we are going to talk some Mandalorian today, Mandalorian episode 2, and probably just more general Mandalorian gushing and praise. And we're also going to talk about Jedi Fallen Order, which we've both played to varying degrees so far this weekend because it just dropped. So that's kind of the layout of the show today. We talk about Mandalorian, which we're both loving, and first impressions of Jedi Fallen Order. So I would assume, kind of goes without saying here, that we are going to be talking about the Mandalorian episodes that are out so far, both 1 and 2. We're going to be talking about all the stuff in there, including like spoilers, I guess you would call them. I mean, the show's out, so spoilers is a weird term to use for it, I guess, but yeah, we're gonna talk about all the detailed stuff from both episodes. So if you haven't seen them yet, or if you live somewhere where you can't see them, because that sucks for some people, then use the chapter markers and skip to the second part of the show where we talk about Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah, and we will be talking about Jedi Fallen Order in more vague terms, I think, because I think a video game is different than a 30-minute TV episode in that, like, people play at different speeds and different abilities, and so you can't just be like, hey, the game's out, I'm gonna talk about everything, because it's a lengthy process.
Yes, and
so it will be much more broad terms for Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah, and it helps that I'm not very good at video games and also don't have a lot of time to play them because I'm like maybe 3 hours into Jedi Fallen Order, maybe.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want you to spoil it for me either, Ryan. So yeah, we'll talk maybe relatively detailed about the first like 2 hours of the game or something. But I mean,
sure.
You probably so do the reviews. You know what I mean?
Like anything. Yeah.
I
anything that we would talk about is already out there and has been out there for a while.
Yeah, and in my first couple hours playing the game, I haven't come across anything that's like, oh, wow, that's wild. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unlike The Mandalorian, where, say, I watched the first episode and it's like, whoa, galaxy-changing content right there. Jedi Fallen Order is not quite like that, so I'm not too worried about the spoilers as far as that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's jump into talking about The Mandalorian. Disney Plus, you put in the show notes first here. It's working like a dream for me. How about you?
Yes, for the most part. The app is finally working properly on my TV. The PS4 app has gotten like 2 updates since the service launched. Subtitles are still off. I tried watching Mandalorian with subtitles this morning, and they were, like, way fast. Oh. They were, like, 2 lines of dialogue ahead of what the characters were actually saying.
Huh.
So, again, like, that's kind of disappointing. Like, I watch, I like to watch Star Wars with subtitles after I've seen it a few times because I like to see like the spellings of words and stuff for like some of the in-universe language, and so this was kind of disappointing that the like last time the subtitles weren't even showing up. This time they're too fast. But I've no doubt they're going to like get the issue ironed out, but yeah, it's just kind of like wow, it's almost been a week.
Yeah. Hopefully that's a weird bug or whatever it probably is. I wonder if it would vary. I guess you've used the PS4 app, the Roku app, the iOS app or whatever. You've used a couple different ones, right?
Oh, yeah. Actually, they're fine on iOS.
Okay. See, I was going to say, I bet it's like a thing where it could be like a platform-specific bug or whatever that they need to iron out.
So the issue is, on my Roku app, there's no option for subtitles on the one on my TV, which is kind of weird. But because like when I like pause the video, like there's no way to like go click on a subtitle thing. It's just like fast forward or rewind
Yeah.
are the only options. But then on PS4, there's the option. It just doesn't work. But on iOS, watching on my phone, it works fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it must be. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. I was gonna say it must have something to do with like probably like OS level implementation of subtitles, because various apps use that and stuff versus like whatever. Okay, so cool. Yeah. Otherwise, I think I haven't heard too much. As far as people complaining that it's like the first day when it was overloaded and people were having trouble logging in or getting content to play or whatever. I think it's been pretty smooth sailing as far as I've seen. So, I watched episode 2 of The Mandalorian this morning before we recorded on my TV. I've usually been watching them on the iPad actually for at least the first viewing, because I just get up at 5 a.m. And lay in bed and watch it before I like get up and start my morning routine. On these Friday mornings, Wednesday and Friday morning when they dropped. So it looks great there. But yeah, I watched it on my TV this morning and looks really good. Sometimes when you stream things through Netflix or, that kind of stuff, there's a lot of, I don't know what the technical term is, but like artifacting and stuff like that. If it's ever dark, you can see like kind of just the compression of the image and stuff. And, there's a little bit of that obviously with something like this. I'm sure if they put it out on Blu-ray, which I hope they will, it'll look even better than it does. But man, it looks really good streaming. I have no issues there either. So on TV, on the iPad, wherever, it's looking real good. So and I haven't had any like buffering or any kind of weird hiccups. Or sometimes I'll watch stuff on streaming apps too, and it'll be like, oh, it looks really good, but then it's like chugging, or it'll like
suddenly drop a level.
Yeah. Haven't had any of those kind of issues at all. Dan has been doing some investigative reporting as far as the audio levels go. He's getting to the bottom of this. Apparently, episode 2 of The Mandalorian is quieter than episode 1, which I did experience this morning when I was downstairs watching it on my TV. I had to kind of crank the audio a little more than I do for most stuff. So I don't know, maybe that's a weird bug again or whatever, where it sounds a little different, but.
Yeah, and we've noticed that across the board, Disney Plus is a bit quieter than other things. I've definitely noticed, because I've been going back and forth between watching Disney Plus and playing Jedi Fallen Order. I definitely notice if I forget to turn the volume back down and then start up Jedi Fallen Order, and it's like big THX experience in my living room. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that game sounds great. We'll talk about that when we get to that section. So let's jump into episode 2 of The Mandalorian. I know, Ryan, that when we did our first impressions of The Mandalorian earlier this week, I ran out of time, kind of had to rush us to a close. So I know you have some lingering thoughts maybe about the first episode, but I don't know if those will kind of just filter in naturally as we discuss the second one. Okay, cool. So what are your impressions of the second episode?
Man, it was the same feel but different. This, the first episode was a pilot episode. It set up a lot. It really gave us kind of like the state of the galaxy and the state of the immediate vicinity around the Mandalorian. We got to, learn about like, fallen Empire soldiers, and we got to learn about like how the Mandalorian society is keeping up and how the bounty system works and all of these things. I feel like world building almost has like a negative connotation in 2019, but obviously it was really well done and it was really intriguing stuff in The Mandalorian for that first episode. But I felt like that first episode was a lot of that. It was a lot of world building, and it was fantastic. And then this episode felt more just full on plot focused.
Yeah, for sure. I think I preferred this episode to the first one. I mean, it's not a contest or anything,
Yeah.
Not trying to pit episode 1 against episode 2 here and have a battle for a victor there or anything. But like, I kind of liked episode 2 a little more. I think because it did feel like maybe we'd settled into what a standard episode of The Mandalorian would feel like, versus, like you said, the pilot, which has a sort of a different task it needs to accomplish. So, I totally agree. I think it definitely felt like this is more like what we'd expect potentially from an episode of the show. So, and it's wild too because I thought the first episode was very the show is very Western inspired. It's like, man with no name, sort of like just silent protagonist kind of thing. But there was the Horatio Sands alien, cracking jokes, and there's Werner Herzog, doing his, his monologue there. And then in episode 2, it's like, I don't know, man, 15 minutes, no dialogue. It's just like a silent movie.
Yeah.
Which was great, but that was definitely a unique kind of element here as well. So,
yeah. I feel like with we in the first episode we were getting bounced around a lot in order to, like we were just saying, like establish the world and everything and the stakes, and again, pilots have different roles, but this episode, like, everything just felt like it had time to breathe. We were able to get so many good, just like small moments, and it really just like moved at a pace where you could just like soak things in without like constantly being like, wait, what is this? What does this mean? What's going on here? Okay, so whoa, okay. But like you could just kind of like soak in and just like feel, the story.
yeah.
And I mean, I thought, yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, now that you say that, though, I wonder if this is representative of what a more common episode of The Mandalorian will be like, because I do feel like coming up soon here, I would imagine he's going to be kind of meeting up with Cara Dune, and she'll be joining his little squad, and I think IG-11 will be back at some point, and then I think, a villain of some kind, whether that's Werner Herzog or, the... Giancarlo Esposito character, the is it Moff Gideon? Yeah, Moff Gideon, I think is his name. Once all those characters are kind of in the mix and stuff, it'll probably be it'll move a little quicker, and I bet more dialogue and stuff too. So this might be more representative, but I bet this might be one of the quieter kind of more lonely kind of episodes where you have a silent Mandalorian and mostly silent Yoda baby with a few Nick Nolte lines here and there,
Yeah.
So
and some Jawa-ese.
Mm-hmm. You have an interesting note here, Ryan, about the post-Empire Galaxy being established as cruel. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see this in different ways depending on the planet and the inhabitants. But I think this episode really established the... there's a name for this planet that Nick Nolte Ugnaught is on.
There is?
Yeah, I saw it somewhere.
Okay.
But whatever this planet is that Kuil is on, it's kind of like a man versus nature type struggle, and it's like this is like an uninhabited planet except for obviously when the pirates came, and it's a lot of just like the Jawas live off the land, Kuiil lives off the land, and that's by, his own admission. That's like his choice. Like, yeah, it's what he wanted. But there's a lot of dangerous creatures, and yeah, and I think like this episode does a really good job with like man versus nature in just kind of like surprising ways. Like there's just like a level of just like survival of the fittest happening here that and it's like, with kind of the unceremonious killing of the Jawas, the being, the child, just like swallowing the frog, the stuff with the beast and the egg, which you had an interesting conversation about on Twitter, I saw.
Yeah, I'm pulling that up here. So yeah, Ben of Hyrule on Twitter commented yesterday to us, "Am I the only one feeling like episode 2 of The Mandalorian did not convey the emotional weight of murdering an animal and stealing its unborn child? Generally in Star Wars, creature deaths are a matter of self-defense and not glorified conquests. Ignore Luke and the Womp Rats," which is a fair point. So, yeah, and which is an interesting point to bring up. I'm usually pretty, sensitive about that kind of thing. And I think Ben definitely has a point there as far as, it feeling pretty, brutal is not the right word, but just sort of, there was no aggression on the part of that animal until the Mandalorian, went in there and woke it up and was in its home, threatening its, threatening it and potentially the egg there as well. So, and our friend Jake jumped in on the conversation. Kevin jumped in on the conversation, and we kind of discussed it a little bit yesterday on Twitter. But, some of those guys were suggesting like, well, hey, it's an unfertilized egg, and it's not necessarily that the Mandalorian's attacking this creature's child or whatever, but I don't know. It could have been, obviously, if it wasn't an egg and it was like a baby in there or something that he was stealing, that would have been more brutal or whatever. It also would have been more parallel to what's going on with Baby Yoda, which would have been a little too on the nose, I think.
Yeah.
But kind of my feeling about it was, I don't know what to think about it, being too brutal or cruel to attack that animal, because I think it is like the thing he had to do to get his parts back. It's not like he was like, well, let's just do this for fun. Let's go kill this animal or whatever. Something that had to be done. But, kind of one of the things that I pointed out or kind of thought yesterday as we were discussing this is the writers sitting down to write this episode, there's any number of scenarios that they could create for the next thing the Mandalorian's going to do after episode 1 when he finds this Yoda baby, and the Jawas steal the Mando's parts. There's any number of ways, that they could come up with for him to get the parts for his ship back. And they specifically wrote that he would go find this mother creature and steal its egg. And I just felt like, I don't know exactly what they're going for there, but I think it's kind of hard for me to believe that they're not trying to purposely set up this like parallel situation where you have the Mandalorian being paternal and protecting this helpless child, and then also having to go kind of attack this creature who itself is in its nest and protecting its egg or whatever. And whether the egg is fertilized or not, like I think that's pretty symbolic of, that kind of relationship. So. Yeah.
Bounty hunting is a complicated profession.
Yes, that's what Jake said. That's kind of Jake's response. He's like, hey, nice. He's a Mandalorian. He's a bounty hunter. That's what he's got to do.
Yeah, I think it's like it's partially, his character and his story. And I think you're right. Like those are it's a thoughtful parallel. Um, but at the same time, I also just think we're going to be seeing some of that like kind of gray area morality, because that's the state of the universe right here. Like there really isn't a moral compass at this point across the galaxy. Like I feel like at one time, maybe it was the Jedi, and then it became this more fascist regime, and it was either you're in line with this or you're like diametrically opposed to it. And then there's just like this void, and with the Empire gone. And I think that's going to be conveyed in a lot of different ways in the show.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you don't want the Mandalorian. I mean, he doesn't necessarily have to go into innocent creatures' nests and kill them, murder them, or whatever. But you don't want the Mandalorian to come off as too soft or something either. Now that he's got this little baby Yoda with him, and he's being Mr. Protective Mandalorian, you don't want him to come off as being just completely unthreatening either, or anything like that. So we saw him launching Jawas off the side of a sandcrawler. We saw him disintegrating Jawas, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
We've never seen a disintegration in Star Wars before, have we?
Well, the first was it Trandoshans who attacked him at the beginning?
Yeah.
Because there was that one who was like running, making a beeline towards the child, and then he just like aimed his tuning fork and just like let loose. And that was, I don't know if that was a disintegration or a straight up explosion.
Yeah. I think it was a disintegration, but yes, it was pretty brutal.
There were chunks.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Which I thought it was funny when he was disintegrating the Jawas, that like the robes would like just land on the ground or whatever. It's like
very like Jedi.
Well, yeah. Wouldn't the robes disintegrate too? But no, I like it.
I love it. Yeah, it was so Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that was cool too, because they jumped down and attacked him, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, are they associated with that pirate group from where he stole the Yoda? And I don't think they were, because those weren't Trandoshans there. I think those were what are they called?
Niktos?
Niktos, yeah, Niktos. Yeah. So I think it was a different group, but it was like, well, maybe, they're more like sand people, Tusken Raiders, and they just want to, I don't know, they attack people or whatever. But no, that one was like, had his axe or whatever it was above his head, and he was like, I'm going to kill this Yoda baby right before he got disintegrated. So he wasn't just running to the, like, ooh, let me steal this little baby, It was like, I've got my weapon over my head, and I'm getting ready to, kill the little thing. So I didn't feel too bad when he was disintegrated.
No. And I think this might be a good time to bring up the multiple fobs that we've seen. I noticed this, but I didn't really process it until I was having a conversation with Lindsay in the car the other day about the show. And so we know that the Mandalorian was given a fob from Werner Herzog, and then we know IG-88 had a fob from someone, and then we know that these pirates had a fob as well that was also leading them to the child. And so I'm wondering if like that's something we're going to see in more episodes. We're going to see more characters, coming after the child because they have the fob and they have like a bounty for them. And also like who is giving all these fobs out? And, like, who... Because, like, IG-11's was, you know, the asset needs to be killed. Yeah. And then, like, the Mandalorians was, like, preferably alive, but dead is also fine. And then it seemed like with this pirate group, like, that was another one where it was, like, dead. So I think that's a pretty big mystery, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, the fob situation, because there's definitely a shot in that sequence, you know, after he kills that last Trandoshan or whatever, where the camera definitely like kind of lingers on that fob, and it's the Mandalorian noticing that fob and thinking like, okay, well, there's even more people after this baby. And as you said, there's been multiple already fobs, so who knows if there's more than just the ones we've already seen. But I think definitely like the impression I got from that, especially on the second viewing, is just like the Mandalorian looking at that fob and realizing, okay, this is a highly sought after. I mean, he knows it is because of like the job and everything, but like it's not like the job was just go kill those pirates that had the Yoda baby and now it's smooth sailing from there. I feel like there's still going to be people on his tail the whole time, you know, trying to locate this baby or whatever. So, and so I'm really curious too, as far as like what happens in the next episode with the Yoda baby, because clearly, you know, he's protecting the Yoda baby, but by the end of the episode, the Yoda baby protected him as well. And so they're definitely kind of building a relationship there. And I just can't see him going back to the planet where Werner Herzog is and just delivering Yoda baby to Werner Herzog. I can't see that being like what's going to happen. But you know, if you just follow kind of the plot as it's been so far, it's like, well, he went and found it. Oh, he couldn't get off the planet. This episode was about him getting the Razor Crest put back together, and then he takes off, and it's like, hypothetically, he would be going to deliver the bounty, right? So what's going to happen now that's going to, like, I don't know, just why go back to that planet, period, if you have the bounty with you, the Yoda baby, if you're not going to deliver it to him. Or maybe he's still thinking that he will deliver it to him, and then when he gets there, he won't be able to do it. I don't know. But curious to see how that's going to go.
I think it's interesting how Kuiil's last line to the Mandalorian is like, may the child survive and bring you a great bounty. And like the Mandalorian just like nods and then they're off. And I think for us as the viewers, we're like, why would you give this cute baby who saved your life with the Force, why would you give it to Werner Herzog and the weird scientist guy? Like, no way. Of course you wouldn't do that. But then, like, thinking about the Mandalorian himself and, like, his code and principles, like, he accepted the down payment on it. He accepted the Beskar steel and then used it. And so I think he's intending on taking the child to back to Werner Herzog. And we do know there are, like, we're definitely going to see Werner Herzog again, or likely we'll see him again, because there are lines of dialogue that he that we've heard in trailers and stuff from him that have not been in the episodes.
Okay.
Like the part where he's like, you know, is the galaxy really better off after this revolution?
Yeah.
Like that line, which was not in the first episode.
Okay.
So I think it's like, it's going to make like this fascinating moral and societal dilemma and drama for the Mandalorian.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see kind of where it goes. I don't know where it's going completely. I mean, I know that it's not going to be the Mandalorian just handing over Yoda baby and them doing weird experiments on it or whatever, or killing it or whatever, cloning it, whatever they're going to do. I know that won't be it, but I'm curious to see, kind of how he'll deal with it and what issues he'll wrestle with as far as that goes. Because that's a great point. I mean, he took the bounty, he took payment for the bounty, or at least partial payment for the bounty. So there's definitely gonna be some conflict there about what to do. And then how will Grief Karga, I believe, Carl Weathers, what's his kind of perspective on it going to be, and all that stuff. So we'll see.
And we were talking about this on the last episode, the bounty hunter code, and once you're part of the guild, because we were talking about what would have happened if he would have just taken Horatio Sands up on his offer for more credits instead, and then we were well, he'd probably be kicked out of the guild, and then he'd be successful in this job, but he wouldn't be able to get jobs anymore. And so it's well, if he doesn't deliver this Yoda baby, is he gonna get ostracized from the guild?
Yeah.
And, I don't know. Is that going to, then will he not be able to support his community anymore? Will they come after his community?
Yeah, will he make enemies on multiple sides there, enemies of the Empire, enemies of the Bounty Hunter Guild or whatever, maybe potentially even enemies within his own clan or his own Mandalorian community. So, that'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I really don't know at this point, but definitely I see the seeds of multiple conflicts there as far as all that stuff goes. So,
which is great.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's 6 more episodes, so we're already episode 2. He's on the way back to deliver this baby, so it's not it doesn't seem like anyway, a situation where it's this whole season he's been trying to get this bounty, gets the bounty, but then what's he going to do? And that's the climactic episode or whatever. It seems that will be kind of more that conflict about what to do with the baby and how to protect the baby, and the consequences of not handing over the baby is probably going to be the engine that drives the plot for the rest of the season, I think.
I think, yeah.
Which sounds good. And it's also one of those things too, I know that they're wanting us to feel this way, but as I watch episode 2 and he's just walking and the baby's floating next to him or whatever, I just always feel so nervous about, because for instance, when he was talking to the Jawas and the baby was back there in the sandcrawler and or not the land speeder, and he had to yell at the Jawas, get away from it, I was oh my God, he's just that little Yoda baby's just sitting there, you know what I mean? And anybody could do anything, I don't know. And obviously he almost, Yoda baby was almost attacked by that creature in that final battle of the episode. So he just feels very vulnerable. And I would imagine that if, as the show goes on, that vulnerability will continue to create tension as well.
Yeah. And shout out to Sky Talkers podcast for their recap of episode 1, where they basically called it, and to be fair, I did mention this in our last episode as well, but they went more into depth about it. It's very Lone Wolf and Cub. Lone Wolf and Cub is a story about a lone samurai who is carting his baby son across Japan in a stroller, and it's a very dangerous Japan, and the samurai's strong, but the child is a point of weakness for him, and having to protect, and that's exactly what is happening here, is what happened in that type of story, directly inspired, and it's very cool.
Yeah. I wish that I was more knowledgeable. I need to kind of go back and maybe study more of the westerns and the samurai films and stuff that are that inspired George, before making the original trilogy, but also is clearly inspiring Jon Favreau and everybody working on Star Wars in this current era as well. But like that stuff, I have only seen maybe one or two Kurosawa films, and the Western has never been my favorite kind of genre of film or anything like that.
Same.
So there's a lot of Westerns that are, I think, being referenced, and a lot of probably samurai films and stuff that are being referenced that would be good to have a stronger knowledge of. So
yeah.
But okay. What I do have a fairly strong knowledge of, Ryan, is Super Star Wars on the Super Nintendo. Watching the Sandcrawler sequence on Friday morning, I was like, oh my God, this feels so inspired by the level in Super Star Wars where you have to like climb up the Sandcrawler, and there's Jawas like trying to throw stuff at you or attack you as you're trying to move up to the top of the Sandcrawler. And I don't know. I think actually maybe it was inspired by that, or it was like a little shout out or reference to that, It just felt like there was times when Jawas were like popping out of windows on the side of the Sandcrawler and stuff, and like throwing stuff down. I was like, have these dudes played that game, or what's going on? Somebody working on the show, maybe. Although they're a little older than I would expect to have played Super Star Wars, like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. Favreau was probably like working on Swingers when that game came out, or whatever. So I don't know like if he was sitting around playing Super Nintendo, but maybe somebody, because it feels very or I don't know, maybe the people who made Super Star Wars were inspired by the same stuff in A New Hope as these guys were when they made this episode. But
I mean, maybe it's just a natural place that you go to where we're like, okay, we got a Sandcrawler here, and it's got like all these windows and stuff. Like, let's try to climb up the side, and Jawas are gonna poke their heads out and try to disrupt you with mischief.
Right.
throwing metal parts.
Yeah, could be. This episode directed by Rick Fumiyama. Is that I think that's how you pronounce his name, but it was there was a couple like really cool sequences, lots of cool sequences, a couple of really cool shots where I was like, oh, that was really well done, like Mandalorian on the side of the Sandcrawler when they were, and I love that too, like the one Jawa's like gets on the like weird like telephone thing, it's like a at Discovery Center, the tube that you talk into, and then like goes through somebody on the other side can hear it. It was like one of those very manual, like you can see the cord that's going to go to the other part in the Sandcrawler. He's like gets on the horn and he's like, okay, take the ship over by the wall, the mountain, so you can crush the Mandalorian.
It was very Chewbacca on Vandor. From Solo, where you're like, uh-oh, is he gonna get decapitated by the wall?
Yeah, but I almost feel like it was better than that, because that was so telegraphed, and like that thing with Chewbacca was like, it wasn't that tense because you saw it coming from like 10 miles away, and it's like, well, clearly he's not going to get crushed. And I never thought the Mandalorian was going to get crushed either. The show's named after him, but it happened very quickly, so it's like, they pull over to the wall, and the Mando's like, whoops, and it's like 1 or 2 seconds pass, and he's, flipped up there.
Rolled
versus
up,
like, a longer shot, and you see the Mando on the side, and you see the wall coming, then you cut back to the Jawa, then you cut back to the Mando, you know what I mean? Like, you could really drag that out, and they kind of did drag it out more in the sequence in Solo, and maybe they're just
which is also hilarious because everyone's like, well, obviously Chewbacca doesn't get decapitated.
But
this movie,
it was like long enough that it was like a sequence featured in the trailer for Solo. You know what I mean? Like, it was like this whole long thing. So, and that, I mean, maybe they're just kind of going for something a little more fun and campy and almost funny, kind of thing with the Chewbacca sequence. But this was like legit tense. It's like, oh, damn, this wall's about to crush me. And
and there's like metal scraping on rock and stuff happening. Like, it was the worst word, but more visceral.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And overall, I thought the episode was directed really well. I think that has a pretty consistent style between the first episode and the second, as far as that goes. I don't really notice, because that's one of the things people have been talking about, and we'll see what happens when the Taika Waititi episode comes out. But that's one of the things people have been wondering. It's like we've got all these different directors announced, and some of them have pretty different styles from others. Dave Filoni's an animation guy, and Taika Waititi's a Taika Waititi guy. And it's just like it's. What's it going to be like? Are we going to have kind of whiplash, going between these different directors and stuff? And I thought, both episodes seem pretty consistent with one another as far as the direction goes and that kind of thing. And I don't know how I don't know how any of it works, but like I noticed there's a different cinematographer or director of photography for this episode than there was for the first. But clearly there's a creative team that's kind of overseeing that stuff. I think Greg Fraser is the DP on the first episode, and I think he's also an executive producer, is what it looked like. And so I wonder if, there's a different DP on different episodes, because just for the same reason you have a different director on different episodes, like to keep working more quickly, and because one person maybe couldn't do all these episodes like all together like that. But maybe you have okay, the one director of photography is also an executive producer, because maybe he's the one who's kind of overseeing, kind of setting the tone and kind of calling the shots, as far as, because you wouldn't want a different director of photography coming in and sort of, having a completely different look every episode either. You need somebody who's, and I'm sure Favreau is that, as far as the tone of the episodes go, working with the directors and stuff too. So
yeah, and I think having Favreau there, who's someone who's worked as a director in a lot of different genres and budgets, having he has the skill set and just the language to kind of steer the ship, I think. So I have faith it's gonna stay pretty consistent, but I think we are going to get different different directorial flourishes throughout here, and I think that's also exciting.
Yeah. I thought this was the case, and I just went and confirmed it. Greg Fraser is, like I said, he was the cinematographer on the first episode. He's an executive producer on the show, but also he was the cinematographer for Rogue One as well. So, which kind of makes sense, because there's a lot of comparisons, I think, in terms of look and tone between Rogue One and The Mandalorian here. So,
yeah,
that's cool. Okay. Music, Ryan?
Music. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's safe to say the soundtrack is iconic at this point.
Yeah. I have found myself a few times already just walking around the house going ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum. I just have that in my head, and yeah.
It's been in my head.
Yeah.
Just nonstop. It's in my head. I've listened to the soundtracks while I'm grading papers and stuff, doing those kind of tasks, and it's iconic. It's already in there. It's Star Wars. It just fits. It's also so different. It's wild. I was I was watching this morning, and I had my Sony Gold headset on, and I was just cranking it because I wanted to pick up all the details in the soundscape for this listen, and when we got into the fight with the beast, it's straight up industrial. The music, it's just these pounding synth drums, and then just crunchy synth coming through there. It's we've never had music like that in Star Wars. And I think we noticed you notice it like right off the bat in the first episode, like, oh, this is different sounding with like some of the horns and stuff. Like, oh, this is different for Star Wars. But like that fight with the beast, it's like nothing. Like, no one has ever gone that hard on Star Wars music. And so, like, it's just these, like, pounding drums. It, like, sounds like Ministry or something. And then, like, all of a sudden, then when the child starts using the Force, all of a sudden, it, like, cuts to, like, I don't know, like, almost like Spanish guitar type thing, and it actually reminded me a ton of like the first few Silent Hill games and the Silent Hill films, like the music in that. And yeah, it's wild. Like, it's so cool. And it's also like, oh, this is like very like, you know, I don't know, postmodern or contemporary. These are like contemporary sounds. Like, these are very earthly musical sounds that are not just in orchestra, but it still fits, and it still feels like Star Wars. It just feels like this different kind of Star Wars. And like, I think they, like, right now in episode 2 of The Mandalorian, I think they have taken Star Wars music as far as you can take Star Wars music without, like, crossing the line into, oh no. Like, yeah, I think, because I was also thinking about, like, how much more contemporary could you get? And something that was cool, but now in retrospect I kind of wish it like hadn't happened, was in Game of Thrones, when they would have like the Hold Steady do like a song, or I think there's like a national song or something in there, and Ed
Sheeran in the episode.
Yeah. And like that's where I'm like, ugh, we can't do that in Star Wars. We can't have that in Star Wars.
Oh, I agree. I wouldn't want that, period. But it was only on the end credits when they would do that, right? They didn't do that like, in the episodes, but I still wouldn't want that. I agree.
I still don't want. Yeah, I don't want it in credits.
Which, by the way, the credits on this show are like a master class in how to do like awesome credits with the.
Dude, when
the
do
artwork.
we get this art book?
Yeah.
Where is this art book?
No, I was just thinking about that too, because I was talking, earlier about like, oh, I wish I had more knowledge of, some of the source material. Shout out to Force Material, who is the show about the source material of Star Wars, and always has great commentary on that kind of stuff. But no, I was, as I was thinking about that, like, oh, I wish I was more familiar with some of the source material for this. I thought, man, I need that Phil Shostak Art of Mandalorian book. But of course, I'm not going to bother Phil about that on Twitter, as he periodically has to just retweet himself stating any announcements about art books will come from StarWars.com and not from this Twitter account. As people ask him about it. But no, I have a feeling maybe, I don't know how many seasons The Mandalorian will go. I don't think it'll be like a 6-season show or anything, so if it's 2 or 3 seasons, maybe they would just do an Art of Mandalorian book like when they're done producing art for The Mandalorian, because like when the Art of the Rise of Skywalker comes out, the art department will have closed down for The Rise of Skywalker. The movie will be done. You know what I mean? The show's not done yet, so it would be almost odd, honestly, to put out an Art of Mandalorian book at this point, unless they're going to do one for every season. But I don't think that really makes a lot of sense. So. Now, granted, if StarWars.com announces the book tomorrow, I would be so happy to buy it and pick it up. But I think it makes more sense to wait until the show is done.
I think an art book between seasons would be great. I bet there is, just in these first 2 I think you could have an art book a 300-page art book for these first 2 episodes, honestly. But I think you definitely could for the first season.
Yeah.
I think I'm hoping for one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of there's not enough art to do the book. I mean, Phil has commented often about how the percentage of art produced for these movies that ends up in the art of books is very small. You know, like there's much more art that you don't see that he's not able to squeeze into the books than, you know, actually shows up there. So I don't think it's a question of, you know, is there enough? But then at the same time, I would think from the publishing side of things, I don't know that you're going to get like the percentage of the audience that you're going to kind of convince to buy more than one Mandalorian art book is probably like, I think you would get a lot of people getting the first one, but then I would think it would kind of slow down from there. And so as far as like the actual success of putting the books out, I would think they'd probably have better success doing one. But again, I'd be happy to be wrong about that. I was also thinking too, like, man, wouldn't it be great if we got like a nice, like solid, like hour and a half long, you know, making of season 1 documentary on Disney Plus sometime in between seasons 1 and 2. That would be, I think, a huge missed opportunity if they didn't do that. So I really hope that is something that's in the works. You know, I can't see why they wouldn't do it, honestly. I mean, I like I said, missed opportunity, almost weird. Like, why would you not do that? So hopefully they will, or are working on one of those. And then also, I could see too, you know, there could be publishing announcements. You know, we haven't really had any Mandalorian tie-in material as far as comics and books and things like that go. But I would think that's kind of a no-brainer as well. So maybe next summer, you know, somewhere around there, we'll get some of that kind of Mandalorian content too, to kind of bridge the gap between seasons 1 and season 2. I mean, I don't know if there'll be a gap as far as like story goes, but just a gap in our lives where we're not getting any Mandalorian content, you know.
Yeah.
So you get a Mandalorian prequel or, you know,
well, I think
a Nick
you
Nolte book, you know.
That's what I was gonna say. I think you could definitely tell stories of some of these characters we've already met.
Yeah, for sure.
Like Werner Herzog and Grief Karga
Yeah.
and Kuiil and all these characters, Cara Dune eventually.
Yeah.
Like before the Mandalorian came into their lives.
Yeah.
I would be more excited about that than a Mandalorian prequel.
Yeah.
I like just kind of
maintain the mystique,
coming in where we are with this character. I don't really, at least for now. I think like years down the road, you know, after the show is wrapped and everything, then I think it would be like appropriate to do, you know, some supplementary material about like, you know, his life before the show. But as of right now, like, I'm kind of cool with how much we know about him.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Good point. We should talk about Yoda Baby a little more, I think, before we move on to Jedi Fallen Order, because yeah, he used the Force in this episode. We haven't talked about that. We talked about the episode for 50 minutes, and we haven't discussed the fact that Yoda Baby is, in fact, Force sensitive, which I think we all kind of felt or assumed after Chapter 1. But, yeah, man. Like,
well, and knowing what we know about Yoda and Yaddle.
Oh, my God. Yep, sure. No, I mean,
Yaddle, the number 3 top article on Wikipedia right now.
Yaddle. Well, I'll tell you what, that doesn't surprise me, because one of the things I think that is so smart and so exciting, and just they've really killed it as far as the show goes, is this Yoda Baby thing kind of like capturing the zeitgeist and being like a thing that's just like really got people, like when you think about, you know, kind of when Stranger Things comes out and like for a week or two there, like everybody's talking about Stranger Things, feels like everybody's watching Stranger Things, at least everybody who knows what's good for them, Ryan, or like with Game of Thrones, like, and you know, when it was most popular, everybody's talking about Game of Thrones, or, you know, the way it was when Breaking Bad was wrapping up and stuff like that. I just feel like they very smartly, chose to include this Baby Yoda thing because it's like the show is great, and without the Baby Yoda thing, it would still be great. But I feel like it would be great for hardcore Star Wars fans or whatever.
Yeah.
But the Baby Yoda thing is just like everybody's invested in that, I feel like. And it's the thing that's making people go like, oh, damn, like I want to talk about this show and I can't wait for the next episode. It's like, what's going to happen with this Baby Yoda? So if it was just like, oh, it's a cowboy show about a Mandalorian who doesn't say anything and occasionally uses a flamethrower on weird alien creatures, I just don't think you'd have the same like kind of excitement from probably a pretty huge audience. I mean, Disney Plus numbers are out of control. Like they had 10 million subscribers on the first day, I think, and the service I think has been a big success as it launches here. And the Mandalorian I think is definitely the premier kind of original content on the service right now. It's like the thing that a lot of people I'm sure are subscribing so they can watch like The Little Mermaid or whatever. But while you're there, you're going to check out maybe like the big new show that's on the service. And I just think a lot of people that aren't necessarily, huge Star Wars fans are watching The Mandalorian, and I think they're going to keep watching and keep talking about it because of Yoda Baby.
Yeah, I was talking to people at work on Friday, and we were just kind of like chit-chatting and like, oh, what are your plans for the weekend? And I was like, probably just a lot of Disney Plus. And like multiple people were like, same. And like yeah, and these are not like hardcore Star Wars fans, but people were talking. I mean, a lot of people have Disney Plus and are familiar with it. Like it's not like a CBS All Access or one of those like other streaming services where people are like, what is this? What can you watch on it? Like, like it's a big thing. And no one wants to watch the Lady and the Tramp show. Everyone's like, those dogs look creepy. So I think
Charlotte from Sky Talkers said she likes it. She said it's good.
Okay.
So
okay.
I don't want to watch it either, but I'm just saying I saw one positive review.
Her.
It's the only thing I've seen anybody say about it, and she said it's good.
Okay.
I don't know if the noodle smooching is in there still or what, but
it definitely is.
What a weird phrase, but continue.
And we also are like, yeah, exactly. Like we know exactly what you're talking about when you say Lady and the Tramp, noodle smooching.
God, Irvin Kershner probably loved that scene. You know what I mean? He probably really loved that one.
And then kiss. No, so I think like Disney Plus is a thing that is on people's TVs now, and I know like I was like, I'm watching Mandalorian and Clone Wars on there, and like people were like, I wanna watch that Mandalorian, like I'm waiting for my brother, or I'm whatever, but I'm definitely gonna watch that when I have time, and these are like people who like don't always talk about Star Wars, so I think it's a good sign, and we can see by like the very open spoilers at this point on Twitter that it's definitely something people are talking about.
Right on. Okay, well, you know what, Ryan? Why don't we? I think we could save is the show a primary text question for down the road.
Okay.
As we continue to watch the show, I have some thoughts on it. Of course, I'm sure you do as well. But we won't have this new video game, Jedi Fallen Order, that's just dropped every week. So I kind of am itching to get into talking about that, and maybe we could come back to this other question next episode or something along those lines.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move into to talking about Jedi Fallen Order then. Like I said at the top of the show, I have played a couple of hours only, maybe like 3 hours or something along those lines. And just for background on my video game kind of like experience and stuff like that. I do play games, lots of games, I guess, but I usually play not this kind of game, which is like a triple A kind of modern action, heavy. Well, action, maybe not so heavy so far anyway, actually. But I don't know.
Actually, this game is very similar to the kinds of games you like.
I guess. But to me, like I play a lot of, I play Zelda games, and so I can see some connection to that. And I play Metroid games and I can see some connection to that. But like I don't play stuff like Tomb Raider and Uncharted and, Last of Us and like the big AAA games that I think are also some of the kind of are kind of similar to this sort of game. So like I started playing it yesterday and I was like, oh man, I'm not good at this kind of game. Like all the combat stuff, I was just like, I'm just not used to this kind of thing. And like every button on the PS4 controller does something and I'm just not used to that kind of thing either. Like I play more games on Switch and I play more like sort of retro games or more
platformers.
like platformers. I love like Mario Kart and Super Smash Brothers and stuff, but I usually don't play like super technical games, modern kind of like technical games, So I definitely was a little put off in the opening like level of the game where I was just thinking like, dude, is this going to be, if it's going to be tons of combat and tons of, kind of complex controls and stuff, like, I mean, I'll get through it because, like I said, I'm a relatively experienced like video game player or whatever, but I definitely was not in my comfort zone. And I was definitely like, yeah, I'm super glad I chose Jedi Knight as the level I'm going to play on because, it felt a little different to what I'm used to. So now you have played a lot more games that are, I think, similar to this one, at least in those respects. So curious what your kind of initial thoughts were about it, but.
Yeah. I used to play a lot more video games than I do now. Like the past couple of years, I've kind of, I wouldn't say like fallen out with the hobby, but like I just don't devote as much time to it, and I don't play as many games as I used to. But I've definitely played the Uncharted games and finished all of those. I've played like the Tomb Raider games, and I think those are 2 points of reference for this game, but also Dark Souls, and I've played Demon Souls and Dark Souls and Bloodborne, which is also a point of reference in a different way for this game. And then, but really what it comes down to for me is this game feels like Metroid Prime to me.
And they were talking about that in preview coverage, and the developers were talking about that in early interviews and stuff, and I was just like, man, I hope that's actually true and not the kind, because Metroid Prime is one of the games that everybody kind of says their game is sort of like Metroid Prime, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or everybody says their game is kind of like Zelda, but then you play them and you're like, well, usually that's actually not true. You might think it's like Metroid Prime, but it's actually not, you know what I mean? Or Zelda or whatever. And so every game's a Metroidvania now, you know what I mean, on some level. So it's just one of those things where I heard all the discussion and I was like, is it really though? You know what I mean? But yeah, like even I'm only a couple hours in and I'm definitely feeling that Metroid thing. And basically like my impression of the game is that it opens up with a sort of like action heavy, combat heavy,
very scripted
opening level
sequence.
Yes, exactly.
This is like the Uncharted, like everything. It's like it's a movie, but you press 3 buttons. And definitely. I mean, it gives you, I think, probably the idea of that first level, or the goal there was, let's make it cinematic. Let's make it exciting, kind of hook people and make them feel like this will be an exciting story and all that kind of thing. But also it gives you kind of like a little introduction to most of the gameplay elements, I guess, because there is a little bit of like running and climbing, and that sort of thing, platforming, I guess, to a certain degree. And then there's also a pretty heavy amount of combat there.
as well. So you're using a lightsaber like in the first level in the opening minutes of the game and that kind of thing. So it gives you a feel for like probably both of those elements, the fact that you'll be exploring and climbing and jumping and doing all those things, and then also battling as well. So kind of introduces all that stuff in that first level, but like you said, in a very scripted cinematic way. But then you jump into the next level and it's like, oh, there's barely any combat. And when you are engaged in combat, it's like you're just killing lizards and stuff. But it's way more about exploring and opening up pathways through the environment. And then it feels a lot more like Metroid. Even scanning things a la Metroid.
Scanning. So, yeah.
And that's great because that's the kind of game I much, much, much prefer. And a lot of people are comparing this game to The Force Unleashed as well, or have been a little bit. And it's like... if it was more like Force... Well, I mean, I've only played a little bit, so I guess I'm not a definitive voice on this at all, but from what I'm feeling so far, it doesn't feel too much like Force Unleashed because that is very much just an action game, a combat game.
It's very... Force Unleashed, and I like those two games, like, a decent amount, like more than most people. I have like a real soft spot for those games because I think they're fun, but those games are very much like almost like a Devil May Cry. Like you just follow a path and then you go into like a combat room and then you follow like another path and go into another combat room, kind of thing. This is very, very different. And I think, like, I mean, if you followed any of the pre-release information, none of the stuff I'm going to talk about is going to be new to you, but if you're really trying to go in fresh, probably just stop the episode now, but I'm not going to spoil anything, but, I am going to talk about, like, the general structure of the game. Kind of, if you were following any of the previews and stuff, you knew that you would be traveling to different planets in this game. And I'm not going to say what the planets are because I don't think that that's something that's more fun to discover on your own. But I will say, like, when you go to a planet, you kind of just get, like, dropped. And there's some, like, light breadcrumbing of, like, which way to go. But you can kind of just, like, start going off in different directions. And, like, you can find secret things. Just, like, there's, like, kind of an obvious path. But you can kind of, like, go off that path just fine. And maybe you'll find something secret, which... I have to say is not super rewarding finding the secrets in the game because they're usually just like a chest with like a different like lightsaber skin in all of them. And so that's like not terribly exciting because I mean, I've messed around with you get the lightsaber customization very early in the game and I've messed with it a little bit, but it's not like super exciting to me.
Yeah, although I would say I've very few secrets have I found so far, but I would say that like that does kind of remind me of a Metroid game or like a Castlevania game where sometimes definitely in a Metroid game it's like you find some new ability and it's like a big deal because like, oh my god, now I've got this new ability or whatever. But usually in a Metroid game it's like, oh, it's a missile upgrade. Now instead of having 15 missiles you can have 20, and that's useful and it's worth getting for sure, but it's not like you're finding like mind-blowing secrets or whatever. In Castlevania games a lot of times it's like a different weapon or whatever, and definitely again that's more useful than a lightsaber skin or hilt or whatever, but at the same time like I think and so that is like definitely more rewarding. But I also think like part of it when you play those kinds of games is just like, that your map is not complete and you just want to fill in that map. Like you want to get to all the places you haven't been able to get to so that the map is 100% complete. So there's a little bit of and especially like, I feel like in 2019 and as far as video games go, like a lot of people specifically Dan, but Dan, this is true if you're listening, but like a lot of people just like want to have a task that they have to complete, you know what I mean? And so just like, to me, I'm kind of excited about the idea of, and I think like the UI is really useful in this game and really like very player friendly, because like you can, on your ship, you can look at a planet and it'll tell you you've completed this percentage of the planet, and also it'll say like there's 5 secrets and you've unlocked one of the 5 secrets or whatever, basically. So you kind of like, the idea is to keep coming back and forth between the planets, I think, and when you have a new ability, you go back there and you can unlock those things or find those things. And even what I really like as well is that, like, I love Super Metroid, right? But like, if you get a new ability in Super Metroid, the map doesn't tell you then like, oh, go back to this room because there's something you couldn't get to in that room. So you just kind of have to run all over the map again and try to find any things that you now can access that you couldn't access before. But it seems to me like in this game, there's different colored icons and stuff on the map. So like the icon will actually change from one color to the next
from red to green
when you've gotten a new ability, and then and the icon is there, so I need to go back to this spot because now I can get to it. So I guess maybe some people would say, well, I prefer to have to like figure that stuff out on my own, but it would give me kind of some anxiety knowing I'm jumping from planet to planet and then like I got to run around this whole like 3D map again to figure out like what I can get to now that I couldn't get to before. I just like the idea that it'll show you that stuff,
Yeah, and these are pretty large spaces.
Yeah.
On each planet. So I think it's probably good that they have that feature. But what you do get, even if like the contents of the chest aren't super exciting, you do get experience points, or ability points, I guess, that you're filling up a bar, and you fill that up through combat and through finding chests and finding notes, those story pieces throughout the game, and I think that's really cool. So like even when I find a chest, like I don't care about like this lightsaber hilt or whatever, but I'm getting to see that little bar filling up. That's getting me closer to being able to choose another ability on my ability tree. And that's really cool. And I've actually found usually in these types of games where you're finding, where some of the story is told through like objects like notes that you pick up and like codec entries or whatever. I've actually really enjoyed reading. I've actually like gone into the pause menu and read like every single entry that I've found. And I actually get like pretty excited when I see like one on the ground. I'm like, oh, I wonder what this is. And on one planet in particular, where there's a lot of fun mysteries, and it's something that I'm interested in within Star Wars. Like that's been really fun and rewarding, and I don't usually do that in games. I don't listen to audio logs or read those notes or anything, but this, and I think part of it is because it's Star Wars and I like to consume lots of Star Wars information at all times, but that's been a little bit more rewarding than like the actual chess, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I like, I'm just like, so you start off on the ship breaking planet, which I think is called like Baraka. What's it? Something like that. It's not Baraka from Mortal Kombat, but it's something like that. And that was actually a cool moment because I just finished reading Resistance Reborn. Is that what it's called? Resistance Reborn? Yeah, I just finished reading that like last week or whatever, and that planet features prominently in that book. And then I start playing this game, and it's like, oh, now that's where you start off, is on that shipbreaking planet. And I'm like, oh, I just read about this planet and like a whole thing that happened there. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I still haven't read that book.
Yeah, it's really good.
I did. Did you read the prequel comic for this?
No, I haven't read it
game?
yet, no.
Okay. Because that's also really interesting. And it ties in really nicely. Real quick, just about this comic. It's kind of interesting to me that leading up to the release of the game, we got one issue of the comic every week. It's called Jedi Fallen Order Dark Temple, maybe. But we got one issue every week, and then the next issue doesn't come out until December 4th, the final issue.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So
They
I'm
wanna give
wondering
people
if
time to finish the game and
yeah, so there must be like some big tie there. So I think it will be really interesting. Like I've read the first 4 issues going into the game, and then I think I'll probably finish the game and then read the first 4 issues again and then read issue 5, and that will probably line up pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and I've seen those comics at my local comic book shop and just kind of looked at them and been like, well, I don't know. I probably won't care about this story that much, so I don't really care about these comics that much or whatever, you know. I mean, I wasn't there to pick those up, and every comic is like $4, so, you know, it's like I don't really want to just start grabbing them and throwing them into my cart or whatever. Not that I use a cart, but you know what I mean. But I will say that, like, and I don't like story-driven games, and I've talked about that before. I think on this podcast. Yeah, just like to me, usually like a story is not a selling point for a video game for me. Like I just want to have fun playing the game, and I actually get kind of annoyed when games have very verbose and lengthy like story sequences. But I think they've done a really good job with it so far in this game. Like I've actually really enjoyed it, and I'm never sitting there for more than like maybe 3 minutes or something watching a story sequence play out, which is something I hate. Like, you know, sitting there for 10 minutes watching like I'm not watching TV right now. I want to be playing a video game, you know? So, but they've done a really good job of like just kind of filtering the story through the gameplay experience. And there's definitely always a cutscene like before a level and after a level and stuff like that. But, and maybe, you know, there's a few moments like within levels where you kind of lose control of the character and the camera, and it'll go into like a little story scene or whatever, but they're brief and they've been pretty interesting. And in a similar, you know, just like Metroid Prime, a lot of other story stuff is told through, you know, things you pick up in the environment and scan and that kind of thing. And I definitely prefer that, especially because in this game, like you'll scan something and, you know, a lot of times it'll just go into your data bank or whatever, and you can choose to select it and read it. But then sometimes it'll be like a little cutscene sequence or whatever. And, you know, then obviously you watch that, but they're quick, and then you can go back and look at them again in the data bank. So I think it's pretty smooth. And I guess what's important for me as far as story goes is that it doesn't feel like it's getting in the way of the gameplay experience for me, and I have not felt that way about this. So,
yeah, and I think the story being told in the comic is excellent.
Okay.
Like I think it's just good Star Wars. So, but I also think like you could probably wait for the trade paperback a little bit cheaper than buying all the single issues, a lot cheaper, depending on like if you go through Amazon or Comixology. But I think it's a good supplement to.
But are you enjoying the story in the game as well then? Because you're further in than I am, you know. So
yeah, I think it's a very good video game story. It's like it's you know, it gets you to go to the places you need to go and to beat up the people you need to beat up. And it gives you some rationale for why you're exploring as well. And so I think it like serves the purpose for a video game story really well. I don't love Cal. Um,
You know what?
like,
I gotta tell you, I saw that Black Series toy on the shelf, and I've seen like concept art of Cal and stuff, and I was like, this vanilla milkshake, bland little Jedi, I'm just not going to be into this at all. This is going to be the dudes in Attack of the Clones that are just clearly like, walked into the room. They're like, throw a Jedi costume on this person, and like it's going to be so generic. And I think the actor, I'm sorry to him for saying all those things I just said, because they're kind of based on his appearance, in a lot of ways, and it's like it's not fair. I think he's done a really good job. Like I think
so too.
I think he's really good, and like I'm only 2 or 3 hours into the game, and I'm already like, maybe I do want that Cal Kestis Black Series figure, So I think he's a better character than I thought he would be, and I think a lot of that is because of the performance. And truthfully, a lot of the reason I probably didn't think he was going to be a very good character is just because I was like, just thought he looked kind of cut and paste and kind of generic, which he sort of is as far as appearance goes. But no, the actor is really good, and I think it's pleasantly surprised me how I feel about Cal.
I think the performance is excellent because it is this like very it's a very natural performance and I like video games are like getting to this point, but like you think of video game cutscenes from like when you and I first started seeing video game cutscenes on like PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast and stuff, and like video game cutscenes have come a long way in like just the types of performances, and I think like this is like a very like cool natural performance, and I think like you get this feeling a lot when you're on the ship, and like when the characters on the ship are just interacting, like that's great. And very chill and like conversational, and it feels natural and stuff. But I think like also you're like constantly reminded that he's a video game character, because like he has lines that he says over and over again. Like when you open a chest or something, like he has like 3 lines that he'll say, and like it's one of those 3 lines, and you're like, oh yeah, you're definitely a video game character. But I think it's early enough that you probably saw it, but the scene with a musical instrument.
Yeah.
Okay. Like when he sits down with that I was like, oh my God. No, please don't.
He did that.
And
yeah. You know what reminded me that it was a video game? One moment where I was just like, oh, this is some video game ass writing right here, is when they were talking about the holocron and the one alien pilot guy who, by the way, I find him pretty annoying. Like he is just
Grease.
Yeah.
Grease.
Like I guess that's his name. I didn't know that, but okay. Yeah. Like Shriv in Battlefront 2 was awesome. And funny and weird alien, and like I think this character is trying to serve a similar role or whatever, a little comic relief and a little bit like a little more kind of spicy character compared to the 2 sort of stoic like Jedi characters that you're encountering otherwise. But like I just find him annoying. Whereas Shriv I really liked. But anyway, he's like, oh, what's a holocron, and the woman, what's her name?
Carrie Cree.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she was like, "Oh, I think I've got one over here somewhere, or I think I've got one lying around, or whatever." And it was just like, really, that's what holocrons are to you? They're just things that I might have one of those, like it's a tennis racket or something. Like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got one in the closet over here somewhere, or whatever. And it was just like, no, that is a dumb line. Like she would say, I have a holocron, I'll go get it, or like, you know, whatever. Like they're not like these like, oh, just whatever, maybe I've got one lying around, I can't remember if I lost that or what, you know, like that's not how you would treat a holocron. So I had to kind of,
I don't even remember that.
well, it was bad.
Okay.
And then she went and got it, and it was like next to her microwave or something, just like sitting on the counter, like in the kitchen or whatever. I was like, okay,
Wow.
this is some pretty awkward, you know. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just like, again, like I said, like I want to play the video game and have fun playing the video game, and I don't care that much about the story. But there are moments where it definitely reminds you it's a video game, and like that is the kind of thing that like that wouldn't fly in like the worst episode of a Star Wars like cartoon for kids. You know what I mean? Let alone an actual Star Wars like movie or something. Like, oh, I might have a holocron just lying around somewhere. You know, it just would never go. It's a goofy
yeah,
game.
you say that, and then just like wait until we have Kazuto walking around, finds a holocron on the ground, picks it up, and then slips on a banana peel, and it goes flying, and then they have to go chase after it.
Now, in Resistance, like Kaz might, you know, a character might have a holocron somewhere, and like Kaz would probably like trip and fall on a banana peel while like interacting with the holocron. But before that happened, both he and the other characters would be like, wow, a holocron, that's a big deal. You know what I mean? They wouldn't be like, you know, oh, I might have one of those. I might have one in this box with my hydro spanners and, you know, whatever. Like they wouldn't treat it that way. But anyway, too much time on a holocron doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's weird. What else?
The sound.
The sound, yeah.
The sound is great.
Great sound design.
And I really like the fact, and maybe this is common in these kind of big AAA games, but I don't know. But I really like the fact that it had stereo, headphone, 5.1, and 7.1 settings that you could choose. So very customizable there. I don't have a 7.1 setup anymore, but I have a 5.1 setup. So definitely took advantage of that, and that was cool.
Nice. I guess like it's when it comes to like aesthetics, this game is kind of just like unfortunate timing, being released at like the same time as The Mandalorian. Because I think it's like I haven't really noticed the music at all in it.
I have a little bit, and it's been not cool actually. I mean, it's fine, but like on the second planet you go to, the first one that you explore, really, I was like, oh, this just sounds a lot like the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, which I didn't like too much. But then I did hear like a familiar theme or two, like popping in at certain moments or whatever. But the kind of ambient like background music, like it definitely felt more Lord of the Rings to me than Star Wars. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I think like we've talked about this before with like the Battlefront games, like those soundtracks that are like, here's a kind of John Williams-y thing, sort of, and it's like almost like an uncanny valley for music where you're like, this is like sort of familiar, but like it's sort of not. And I honestly like and I get, like, I think, like, going into these types of games, like, you know, when they bring in the musicians, they're like, okay, do something kind of John Williams, but don't, like, exactly, you know, play John Williams music. And I really wish they would just, like, video game music is awesome. Like, video game music has, like, a history of being awesome, like all the way back to, like, the NES. And it's like, why not just like go just do a soundtrack that like fits with a video game?
Yeah.
And like you know, we've seen how much like experimentation like you can do like with the Mandalorian soundtrack and have it still feel right. Like, why do like a Walmart version of a John Williams soundtrack when you could like actually, you know, do something rooted in the medium? Like, think about like Final Fantasy soundtracks and like I don't know, like Contra and Castlevania. I don't know, like any of these like great video game soundtracks over the years. Like, maybe emulate something closer to that, in like a modern way, because it's a video game. Like, do video game things.
Well, I hear you. I don't think I agree with you though, necessarily, because especially with a game like this, like, okay, if it was like a pod racer game or something, like, yeah, do a video game soundtrack, because it's a very video game. And again, like, I don't come to Star Wars video games for the stories or whatever. I come for the gameplay, I don't come to Star Wars video games all that often, because they don't come to me all that often. But,
no.
If I do, it's about the video game, not the storytelling. But that being said, like, I mean, this is a very cinematic kind of Star Wars game. Like, they want you to care about the story. They want you to care about the characters. They want it to feel... It's very realistic looking, and, I think they want you to feel like you're playing a Star Wars movie, sort of. So to then go like, oh, let's just have some like rockin', like prog rock electric guitar type music, like a Castlevania game or something, just because it's a video game, I feel like would really take you out of the experience. I think too, like, I don't really notice the music that much. Like, I mean, I've only played the one, the opening level I played, the second planet you go to, I played, and then I went to the third planet. You can choose which planet to go to for your third planet, but I went to the third planet, and that's where I am now. But in the second and third planets, like, there's no big major story sequences or anything. Well, maybe there is in the third planet. I haven't finished that one yet. But what I'm trying to say is that as I've been exploring those planets, the music has been sort of like very much in the background, and I'm not like too focused on it. I mean, like I said, once in a while it'll be like, oh, that kind of sounds like Lord of the Rings or something. But it's not something I'm hearing a ton, versus like I'm thinking of like Metroid Prime, for instance. There's music in that game that's like certain planets or levels or whatever, where it's just like, dude, like, that's a very memorable song, and you're hearing it like in the front of the mix, like, the whole time you're playing the level. Yeah. And I kind of don't want that. Like, I don't want to be like exploring this, like looking for secrets and trying to figure out like Jedi lore and stuff, and then be like, but there's that really memorable theme that plays over and over and over, and like, I just can't get out of my, I feel like it would distract me a little bit, almost.
Really?
Yeah. But then in that first level, I think the music was definitely more prominent and more kind of, because it was a big, like, loud action sequence and stuff, and, it was more that kind of thing. But yeah, I just like, I feel like, I guess it's like Breath of the Wild too, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Music is very sparse and not really super noticeable a lot of times, and I feel like that's good for exploration, personally. Yeah,
and that's fine. Like, I mean, I think you can also like have quiet scenes. Like, you don't necessarily have to have music like the whole time, but I think it would be cool if there was like a memorable music motif or theme for like boss battles, or for like a really like intense like combat section or platforming section or something, like give something more memorable than just the, like, I think this comes to like a larger point as I'm like unpacking this in my head. Like, I'm kind of just ready for, and like the Mandalorian has like lit a fire under me. Like, I'm kind of just like over the aping John Williams thing at this point, like, and just like the variations of those themes and stuff, and just going back to that well for 40 plus years. Like, I'm ready for something fresh that like fits with what I'm seeing on the screen, but like, is memorable in its own way.
Yeah, I can see that. It's an interesting question though, going into whatever the next sort of trilogy of movies or whatever it's going to be is in 2022, because personally I want the Mandalorian and these other shows to do different things and, explore different kinds of Star Wars, but I kind of want like whatever this new kind of series of films to be a traditional sort of Star Wars story with the Force being a big element and it being a sort of hero's journey type thing and all that. And I think I want the music to be pretty traditional Star Wars. Not using the John Williams themes necessarily, but to be like the traditional kind of Star Wars, music. And I think the reason the music in The Mandalorian works so well is because it's a totally different kind of Star Wars, like story and genre and everything. So it's great to have different kind of music. But I thought the Rogue One soundtrack was really good. And it's in the style of John Williams, but doing something different too. So
it's good, and like the solo soundtrack's good too. But it's also like, I don't know. I think for the films, for saga films, like, yes, keep with like the classical orchestra type. Like, these are dramas, these are theater, these are poetry, like that classical style. But for stuff like Mandalorian, stuff like video games, do try some things. Like, try it. Like, we haven't gotten a lot of Star Wars video games in recent years, but there's hundreds of Star Wars video games out there, and like, for the most part, they all kind of sound the same, because they're all pulling from like the same place. And I think like why not like push it a bit more and try for something more interesting, especially in a medium that's like, I don't know, for people in our generation is also like defined by some of the music from games, like in like Castlevanias and Marios and Zeldas and Metroids and Mega Man, and like all these games that with like these super amazing memorable soundtracks that like progressed over the years and like made that transition to more powerful hardware, and like kept the like cool soundtracks. Like, look at something like Mario Galaxy, which brought in like the orchestral stuff, but like did it in like a very like playful and different way and stuff. I don't know. I think when you're like, they so obviously looked at like a lineage of video games when like designing the mechanics and the flow of this game. Like, I wish they would have like also prioritized the music. And it's not saying the music's bad or anything. It's just like, it's like a Marvel movie. It's like, oh, there was music in that? Like, I didn't notice. And I think like, I don't know. And maybe that's fine. Maybe it's fine to just like not notice the music and like have it be like inoffensive and just there. But like, I don't know, like, or it could be something cooler. It could be The Mandalorian. Like, it could be Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Like,
yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think, if this was Bounty Hunter, the video game, like that game that already happened, Bounty Hunter, like, it would be like, oh yeah, do some kind of like out there soundtrack for it or whatever, or if it was a Force Unleashed, where it was just like, you're just going to be like slicing through dudes nonstop and it's just going to be a big action game. Like, I think even in that case, it's more like, okay, we'll have some like real, kind of memorable, like energetic soundtrack and that sort of thing. I really feel like this game, they were like, let's try to do a story-based game that feels a lot like a Star Wars movie with like a Jedi character and, touching on that same kind of storytelling. So I think they just want to have a similar kind of music to accompany that. But I don't know. I guess we've kind of both said it, our piece on that.
Well,
I don't
care
that much one way or the other. But
it's just something for EA to consider in 11 years when we get our next Star Wars game like this. Just something to think about.
We should mention as we wrap up here that the game has been really well received so far, I think, which is must be a new feeling for EA with Star Wars games, because that has not really happened before. So Battlefront, the first one, had no story mode, and people weren't happy about that. And then the second Battlefront had the awful kind of gotcha, loot box thing going on, and so that was not good for them. And they haven't put out very many games, and they had to cancel some games, and so it's been pretty negative discourse around EA and the Star Wars license, but and of course they don't bring anything to Switch, so there's another mark on their reputation for me anyway. But no, I think this game's been really well received. Like critically, it's scoring well, positive reviews, and I think from what I've seen so far, people are really enjoying it too. So that's a good thing.
I certainly am.
Yeah.
I think I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm enjoying the exploration. I'm enjoying the combat. I always feel like I could be a little bit better at the combat. But they going planet to planet, there are different challenges to kind of keep it fresh and keep it challenging. And I think your skill set has to kind of like adapt to as you go from area to area. And I think that's kind of cool because a lot of it is like timing based with like the parrying and dodging and stuff, and being able to kind of like read. You have to play defensively a lot in the game. Like, I think that's kind of what separates this the most from something like Force Unleashed, where Force Unleashed is like, you just like head down, just charge into a room, like beeline towards the closest enemy and just start like slashing and like throwing lightning and stuff. Whereas this game, like, there is like an element of like, well, I could run at this stormtrooper who's on this ledge over here, but I have to like jump over this gap first, and there's a good chance that when I run and jump over this gap, he's just going to shoot me when I'm in midair, and I'm going to fall into this pit. So I have to actually like play defensively, reflect some blaster bolts at him, and then like head up that way. And it can get really challenging when there's like 3 enemies attacking you at once, and you're like trying to like focus on parrying one at a time and like dodging out of the way and stuff. And I think that's cool and that's fun. So yeah, I'm enjoying that kind of like approach to combat, and I'm glad it's not just like an all powerful like hack and slash.
Yeah, same, and it seems like the similar to a Zelda or a Metroid game. It seems like the combat stuff more punctuates your exploration based gameplay. Like, it'll be kind of you'll explore for a while, then you'll come across some enemies, but it's not like equal parts battling and exploring, at least so far from what I've experienced. It's more emphasis on exploration and traversal, and then versus like every new place you walk into there's like a room full of enemies or whatever. It hasn't been that way so far.
Yeah, but we haven't really mentioned the mechanic of resting. And when you rest, you get your health refilled. You get your like life potions essentially refilled. But then all the enemies return, which is a very like Dark Souls mechanic. And so like if you want to do more combat, and like you could essentially find an area with a ton of enemies, kill them all, go meditate, rest, have them all respawn, kill them again, and like kind of grind to get those ability points and stuff. Like, that's something you can do in this game if you want to. So that's there if you do want more combat, I guess, or if you want like to fast track someone like leveling up those skills.
Gotcha.
Which is cool. It's cool to have that option.
Yeah, and I was nervous about the lightsaber thing too, because like a lot of times I feel like, especially in 3D games, like lightsaber control can be kind of, I don't know, not fun. And so far I think it's felt really good. I've enjoyed that part of it. So just like you brought up
Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast.
Yeah, you brought up reflecting blaster bolts back at Stormtroopers, and like when it introduced that to me, I was like, oh, this actually works really well. Like, it's natural, and it's kind of cool. So,
and it's cool that the difficulty settings it's not just that like enemies do less damage to you. It's like you have a bigger window for parrying.
Yeah.
And like that is really smart design and like really adaptive game design. I was really impressed by that.
Yeah, I'm having a ton of fun with the game so far. So I'm early, and I will probably be kind of slow playing through it. So I don't think we'll be touching on it like every week or anything. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Probably when we finish it, when we're both finished, we'll have a like spoiler
wrap it up,
cast or
maybe.
something.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think we should wrap there, Ryan. So there's a couple other things in the notes we didn't touch on, but we can maybe come back to those next week, I think. So let's wrap it up here. We will be back next week with another episode. Until then, you can find everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. You can email us at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter and comment there as well at Blockade Run. Ryan, you're on Twitter at
Brawn Dwarf, BrawnDwarf, and I will be providing Yaddle content. I'll be retweeting any good Yaddle content I see if you want to follow me, which, by the way, Yaddle is the #1 entry on Wikipedia right now. So just throwing that out there.
So you've just been like refreshing the Yaddle page to make it climb the charts on Wikipedia, or what's the deal?
Hey, I mean, some of those clicks might have been from me and my changing my VPN settings, but no, the people care about Yaddle, John, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, yeah, cool. All of them but me, I guess. So, all right, well, more Yaddle conflict and Star Wars discussion next week. And until then, thanks for listening and or watching, and we will be back with more Blockade Runner podcast and less Yaddle, hopefully, next episode.